Brett Sockled here, helping you make every class Catholic. My first trip of 2025 was to Portland, Oregon to work with folks in the Archdiocese there, and just wanted to share a couple things that showed up in our workshops that day. One of the questions I ask teachers to look at when they're thinking about approaching a given topic from a Catholic point of view is whether there are any moral or ethical questions or values questions that relate to what they're teaching. So I walked up to a group that was talking and they kind of got quiet as I walked up, and I said, tell me what you're, and they kind of laughed and they all looked at this one teacher and said, well, you tell him, And I said, okay, so what are you teaching? And she said, well, I'm teaching about endangered animals. And I said, okay, so like, what's the angle, right? And she kind of like rolled her eyes at me like, well, duh, like, don't behave so that all the animals go extinct, right? Like humans smarten up and be good to the environment, right? And it was just presented as if it was just so obvious. And in a certain way it is, right? If there are species that are endangered because of human activity and human lack of attention to what's going on or respect for the natural world, then yeah, like humans, get your act together, right? But I thought, well, we can do a little better. Like we can think a little more deeply about this. So I said, so why is it our responsibility? And of course I don't disagree. I think we do have a responsibility. But the point was to recognize that this kind of question matters because humans have a particular role within creation, right? From a Catholic point of view, we are stewards. So if, zebra mussels are making a mess of the Great Lakes, we don't think, well, the zebra mussels should get their act together and stop messing up the ecosystem in the Great Lakes, right? But if human activity is leading to problems for other life on Earth, then we say the humans have a responsibility there. And so this very obvious, like, hey, humans, don't act in this way that destroys other life, is maybe not so obvious as we might think, or at least we might not realize why it's obvious, right? Why is it obvious that this is our responsibility? It's because humans have a certain dignity within creation and a certain role that we don't actually think about for any other creature, right? We don't hold other creatures responsible for just acting the way that they do, even if the consequences of that are negative for the rest of the ecosystem or other creatures around them. So there's a thing about human dignity and responsibility that I think is worth flagging, even though the other thing, was kind of the quick and easy, obvious answer. Another conversation that happened in Portland that was really interesting, it was a phys ed teacher who made a connection. And this happens, by the way, this happens all the time. We'll be talking about something in one subject area, and then someone else working in a different subject area will make a connection that the rest of us sort of didn't see coming, right? So very often when we talk about art, literature, music, we will talk about engaging with non-Christian works. And a key principle is humans are trying to say and believe and explain good and true and beautiful things, right? And we don't think Catholics are the only people who manage to do that, right? We expect to find goodness and truth and beauty in the artistic and literary heritage of the world, right? And even in pop music, if students are bringing music to us that they love, we could say, well, that's bad, which generally won't get a great response, even if it actually is bad, right? But we can say, like, what's going on in that piece of art? What is it that appeals to you? There's some good that is being sought, even if it's being sought in a confused or disordered way. There's some good there that's being sought. And so that's a sort of standard framework that I use for engaging with a lot of questions. But the phys ed teacher came up to me. Actually, we were having lunch together afterwards. And the phys ed teacher said, I have a couple students in gym class who are just like way too intense about like the rules. And when something doesn't go their way in a game, they get too intense, And I've been sort of struggling with how to deal with that. And I think what I'm going to try now after this conversation about art is I'm going to affirm their sense of justice. I'm going to say, like, this zeal for justice is in itself a good thing. It may be misplaced, it may be disproportionate to the situation in gym class, and we can talk about that. But in itself, it's not just, you're a person with a bad temper or some other sort of negative starting place, right? But you're a person who's concerned for justice, and that's really good. And we want to channel that energy in good ways, right? Maybe how we're responding to things in gym class aren't the best way to do that. But the thing that is happening in your soul, this like instigation in a certain direction, is built on something good that God put in you. So let's pay attention to that and see if that allows us to make some progress on what's going on in gym class. So I thought that was a really neat connection, and that tends to happen where there's a conversation about one subject or other, and someone working in a totally different field sees a connection that they make, and it's one of the most exciting things to see, because I learned so much watching teachers engage with this material. They come up with stuff that I never would have come up with on my own. So thanks to everyone who came out in Portland. It was great to be with you, and God bless.